As we've discussed, President Trump has signed several executive orders making sweeping changes to the immigration system. Immigration was one of voters' top issues in the presidential election, with many supporting President Trump's message that the current system is broken. But how did we get here? Laura Barón-Lopez takes a deep dive into the history of immigration policies and laws that have led to the complex system we have today.
Since its founding days, the United States had mostly open borders, welcoming immigrants from across the world to work and build lives here. In the late 1800s, record numbers of migrants from Italy, Greece, and Central and Eastern Europe made the journey on newly invented steamships to the United States. Many, especially in America's now crowded cities, began to question the open-door policy.
There was a huge backlash. There was substantial anti-Semitism. There was substantial anti-Catholic discrimination, particularly against Irish immigrants. And so over time, this political pressure built up and built up and built up.
In 1924, Congress passed sweeping legislation restricting immigration.
Congress nearly closes the door, and the part of the door that's open is really just open to Western Europe. Except for Western Europe, the quotas that existed for individual countries were almost laughably small. Sometimes it was this country could have 100 people a year move to this country from places like Southern Europe.
The law, which favored mostly white Europeans, would dominate U.S. immigration policy until the 1960s.
I think it is not a burden, but a privilege to make this really, as it was for them, a new world.
Building on a promise by President John F. Kennedy and making it part of the fight for civil rights, President Lyndon B. Johnson pushed to repeal the quota system. He supported a bill that proponents said would not discriminate against people based on their country of origin, and they stressed it would prioritize skilled workers and family members of people in the U.S., but would not increase the overall number of migrants.
Those promises were absolutely central to selling the bill because the advocates of the bill understood Americans didn't want a huge increase in immigration.
Johnson signed it into law at the base of the Statue of Liberty and emphasized that it did not represent radical change.
This bill that we will sign today is not a revolutionary bill. It does not affect the lives of millions.
The law did, in fact, transform our immigration system, and in particular led to vastly more immigration.
Although the legislation contained annual caps on immigration, there was one important exception: family members of naturalized U.S. citizens.
So if I came and then I wanted to bring members of my family over in subsequent years, only I would have counted toward that quota in the first year, not my extended family members.
Immigration soon soared, and over time, family reunification became the largest type of legal migration to the country. And the foreign-born population shot up from less than 5% in 1965 to just over 15% in 2023.
This is the only area in which the American farm labor supply falls short and is supplemented by Mexican citizens.
Johnson's administration also oversaw the end of a key legal pathway for migrants to work in the U.S. The Bracero program, which had been used since World War II to hire millions of temporary agricultural workers from Mexico, expired in 1964. Those workers continued to cross the southern border, starting a decades-long rise in illegal immigration.
Future generations of Americans will be thankful for our efforts to humanely regain control of our borders.
In 1986, President Ronald Reagan helped pass sweeping legislation that granted a pathway to citizenship to nearly 3 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S. This first modern attempt to crack down on the border failed to deliver, and illegal immigration continued to rise through the 90s.
We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws.
President Bill Clinton endorsed proposals by an independent commission to comprehensively reform the immigration system. But these went nowhere.
You saw pretty quickly opposition come from at least two sources. So one was what I would describe as the corporate right, who were worried about the idea of a reduction of immigration, reducing the workforce, and potentially meaning that they might have to pay higher wages and then have lower profits. And then the other opposition was from nonprofits and advocacy groups, particularly Latino and Asian groups, that basically said we should have more immigration, not less. And over time, those groups within the Democratic Party would really become the dominant voice on immigration, at least until the last couple of years, of saying more immigration is better.
Those tensions continue to plague efforts led by presidents on both sides of the aisle to pass comprehensive immigration reform.
What comprehensive immigration reform referred to was essentially three major provisions. One would have addressed the border and enforcement. One would have addressed the status of the undocumented in the United States. And then the third was changes to the legal immigration system. The concept strategically was that by putting everything together, there'd be something for every stakeholder group to like. Unfortunately, it also meant that there were things that every stakeholder group could not like.
Congress failed to pass bipartisan bills proposed under George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Under President Obama, deportation soared to more than 400,000 in 2013. Almost half of those people were deported under a process called expedited removal, which allows immigration officials to deport individuals without a hearing.
Those individuals were actually apprehended at the border trying to enter the United States. ICE can remove those people very quickly without having to go through the immigration courts. It artificially increases the total number of ICE deportations in a way that's a little bit misleading. Unfortunately, gave President Obama this kind of name, the deporter-in-chief.
By 2016, the situation at the border had transformed. Migration from Mexico began to drop, while increasing numbers of Central Americans began to surrender to border control and claim asylum. Under U.S. law, anyone who claims asylum is entitled to a hearing before an immigration judge and cannot be deported.
Many of them really are fleeing dire circumstances, whether that's due to extreme poverty or crime, corruption by their governments. Many of them do have viable asylum claims. And we've seen, estimates of around 40% of the claims that do get through the system are approved.
Because of immigration court backlogs, this process can take years, and asylees are allowed to live and work in the country until their case is heard.
Smugglers seized upon this, opportunity to start coaching people to make asylum claims, and our inability to fund our immigration courts to handle all these claims created a magnet that drew more people here to this country.
In recent years, this backlog has ballooned from just over 500,000 in 2016 to approximately 3.5 million last year.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
An anti-immigrant agenda was central to Donald Trump's first run for president. As president, he made wide-ranging changes to asylum procedures, including Title 42, which denied entry to asylum seekers under the justification of the COVID-19 pandemic.
What we're doing now is attempting to rebuild the system that can accommodate what is happening today.
President Joe Biden reversed many of those Trump-era policies and oversaw the largest immigration surge in recent history. From 2021 to 2023, annual net migration, both legal and illegal, averaged 2.4 million per year.
Our failure to enforce our laws at the border, to timely provide due process to people at the border, and the perception that the border was out of control. I think that, more than anything, influenced the thinking of people where they would accept this insane rhetoric we're seeing today.
On the campaign trail, President Trump stepped up his anti-immigrant rhetoric.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done.
So the Republican Party became extremely anti-immigration, sometimes giving voice to false and racist conspiracy theories. The way that Donald Trump appeals to nativism, the way he appeals to xenophobia, you absolutely can see echoes from that to the 1924 law. It's absolutely there.
Trump and his advisors have promised radical changes to the immigration system, from gutting legal pathways like refugee admissions to launching the largest mass deportation program in American history. President Trump's advisors claim they will prioritize deporting undocumented migrants deemed national security or public safety threats. But experts say the deportation numbers Trump is talking about would go far beyond that, reaching a scale potentially never seen before in America.
There is no way to do the mass deportations they're talking about and focus them exclusively on public safety threats. immigrants. The more you push the agency to say, increase the total, that pushes you towards the lowest hanging fruit of the immigration system, which are not the hardened criminals. When you do a workplace raid, you don't get gang members. You get people who show up for work every day because they're trying to support their family.
Laying the foundation for unprecedented action he can now take in office. For PBS NewsHour, I'm Laura Barone Lopez.